Actually, ITV had an interesting start in that it was great political arguments going on about whether or not we should ever have it at all. I mean, the Labour government were very much against it, and you got some real crazy nutters in the chamber debating whether or not ITV should be allowed. Lots of people for it, lots of people against it. And if I can just give you a couple of quotes, which I remember from a programme I made about the beginning of ITV, things were quoted like, "I don't want to make this country a refuse bin for the American television industry." Now, if you said that today, you'd think they would start raving mad, but that was the way a lot of members of Parliament felt about it. Equally, there was a lovely quote, which is in Hansard, which is the Bible or the journal, which gives you what was said in Parliament the day before, which some MP got up and said, "I want an assurance from my front bench that this commercial television will never be allowed. It is conceived by evil people for evil purposes." Like, what? You know, we're kind of watching a television drama in itself. But it was brought through, ITV was brought through with an awful lot of hassle. But it did finally arrive, thank God. Looking back on it, and there's no doubt about, you know, the involvement it's had upon the television industry, commercially and aesthetically, and for people who watch it. Yeah, and ITV finally started on September 22nd, 1955. And if you actually say to people, and there's a lot of them who weren't around at that point, are you aware that if you turned on your television on September the 21st, 1955, you clicked on and all you got was one channel, just one. Think about that in today's terms. And it wasn't called BBC One, it was called BBC because there was no other BBC channel. And it wasn't on all the time. And suddenly, whoopee, up comes ITV. And as is proven, highly, highly successful. Well, Wembley was in existence, Wembley as a studio, as you know. Before ITV started, it wasn't a purpose-built studio. Lots of them were after that. I mean, London Weekend Television, another defunct company, but at that time it built its own studio. But Wembley was always here in one form or another. And the programme contractor for the London area, Monday to Friday, which was Associated Rediffusion, had to have studios to do their programmes in. And Wembley was in existence, and somebody sussed it out and said, yes, this would make an ideal television studio. Had to be converted because clearly it was an old film studio, as most of them were. So they converted it to a television studio. Now, alongside that, Associated Rediffusion had to have some studios in central London, and they had one in Kingsway, which was at the end of Kingsway. That was a company called, not a company, it was called Television House, which was actually the headquarters of Associated Rediffusion. But in the basement, they had a couple of studios, so they had one there. Later on in life, they expanded, but Wembley was to me, I think the very first ITV studio as such. ITV. Well, opening night on September 22nd was, I mean, you can look it up, it's all listed. Lots and lots of programmes were pre-recorded, not by Associated Rediffusion, because for some odd reason they didn't go into recording. ATV did, and ABC, as I was saying, they were the fellow companies surrounding the opening of ITV. So the opening night was a pretty preset thing with, I think, a bit of light entertainment from Billy Turner. There was some boxing. But the real, to me, and I think to a lot of us old folk working in television, the first live television programme to hit ITV was the following morning, which was September the 23rd. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was a kiddies programme called Johnny and Flonny. It's a couple of puppets, you know, for the children. But that came out of Studio 3 here at Wembley. There was, well, I mean, doesn't need a mathematician to tell you, we had a Studio 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sure we'll come to Studio 5 later. And 6 and 7 studios were in the heart of London at Kingsway. But yeah, Studio 3, and whenever I come here, which I don't that often, but I do occasionally to watch one of the big shows, I'm amazed there's not a plaque outside. I'm amazed there's not a plaque outside to say this was the very first ITV on-air show of the new era, the new ITV era. I mean, my career in the entertainment industry started off as a rewind boy in a cinema when I was 14. I'm sure very few people will believe, unless you're very old, that you could leave school at 14, but you could, and I became a rewind boy. And then I was lucky enough to get into Denham Studios. I seem to be on this permanent kick where I'm always talking about studios that were and have been, but I suppose that would be life. I got into Denham Studios as a clapper boy, which is the lowest member of the camera department, because that goes clapper boy, I'll be technical for a second, focus puller, camera operator, director of photography, who's the boss man and does all the lighting, and I started at the bottom rung as a clapper boy. I then did a couple of years national service, which you had to, which was fine. I came back, and sadly, the film industry had gone for a virtual chop. That would have been about 1950. So I worked on the odd documentary here and there. And lo and behold, in 1955, I spotted an ad in the Daily Telegraph which said, commercial television commencing in September requires, and it was, I think, the bosses at Rediffusion who were going to be part of the setup. Most of them were American, and they used American terms for technical capacities. Now, a cameraman in America will be a video operator. To me, a video operator is a man who looks after videotape machines, but video operator was the cameraman. Audio operator, not difficult if you're in the industry to understand why, audio operator was a sound man. But the ad said, commercial television, didn't list any company's name, requires video operators, audio operators, floor management staff, which is still, I applied, had a meeting in Stratton House. This was about 6 months before ITV started, got accepted, joined Associated Rediffusion's training college at the Viking Studios in Kensington, did a 3-month course on how to become a good television cameraman. I think I was, he said immodestly, alongside another 50-odd guys who were going to be cameramen. Joined AR. I came here to good old Wembley Studios on Thursday the 23rd of September and worked on Johnny and Flonny, the first kiddie ITV programme, and then worked on loads of other big shows as a cameraman, senior cameraman. And 1965, I became a director, much to the delight of all the other cameramen, because it's not necessarily dead men's shoes, but if a senior cameraman gets made a director, then another cameraman becomes a senior cameraman, and so on and so on. They all shuffle up. So I was quite popular, became a director, directed lots and lots of stuff, mostly outside broadcasting, which I loved, because it was nearly all live. Did 9 Miss Worlds, probably that's the biggest thing I would have done. Not necessarily the most pleasing or aesthetic show, but very high ratings, live, good fun to do. And retired as an executive producer in 1991 from Thames, then did 12 years of freelance. I popped back to Wembley on the odd occasion because I have a member of my family who works on the X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, so I get invited back occasionally. And it is just nostalgic and marvellous to walk into Wembley Studios, and particularly to walk into Studio 5. You know, it hasn't changed. Yes, it has, as I've said, maybe technically, but it's absolutely fantastic to see it empty. It really is. I mean, it was, maybe still is, the largest studio in Europe. No, but that's more or less my potted career. A lot of other highlights, I guess. I worked on the Frost programme for about a year, which was the one including the Emil Savundra interview, which the IBA deemed to be trial by television, but these are long since gone. We're talking old hat, talking, you know, millions of years ago. Well, the atmosphere when AR owned this site was marvellous. I mean, I don't want to sound like an enthusiastic kid, but television is an amazing, lovely industry to work in. In my day, it was pretty much staffed, so we were very lucky. And these days, as we know, it is 90%, I think, probably freelance. But there was, because it was staff, it was always the same people, usually the same directors, cameramen, soundmen, one big massive family. And you know, it was kind of like working in, I know this sounds crazy and hard to accept, but it was like working in fairyland, you know, like it's not for real. Highly enjoyable, well paid, no doubt about that. Just very, very enjoyable to do. Compared to looking at how other people earn their money, and they may earn an awful lot more. I mean, television is amazing, still is, was then, very accessible in terms of transport to get to it. Had a marvellous atmosphere and a marvellous group of management people. It's showbiz, it was great, I loved it. And I was very thrilled when it was taken over as a facilities company by Fountain. And as I say, I've been back and it's all been part of it. But I think you were very lucky. A lot of people of my age who've worked in television will actually tell you or anybody else listening, we actually did live, I think, in that period through the best times of television. It's now got very highly commercial, perhaps very political, but then look, I'm waffling on, and perhaps I shouldn't on that side of things. But no, that period for me, my founding years of television, before I went to Thames, which was equally as good fun. I'm not making any comparisons. But they were great years, they really were. Well, I think Studio 5 was built because you did need more space to make the programmes which Associated Rediffusion were doing. It made life a lot easier for everybody, particularly for set designers, for camera crews who got more room to manoeuvre themselves. No, I think it was commercially a good idea. And I think the prestige involved, having built the largest studio in Europe, was very good for Associated Rediffusion. I don't know the economics of it, whether or not it nearly broke them or I've got a clue. But it did make sense in terms of technical television production to have a big studio. And it was always in use, no argument about it. As we know, it could be split in two, into Studio 5A and 5B, so one half could be empty. It wasn't necessary to, I don't think they were trying to save on the heating bill, but nevertheless it was, you know, you could split it in two. I think there were occasions when they did all run at once. Studio 5 tended to take over an awful lot of what Studios 1 and 2 would be doing, purely because of the size of it. I mean, it was a lot easier doing programs in here because you could put more sets in. Now, we've got to differentiate slightly here between recorded programs and live programs. Recorded programs you could shoot over 2 or 3 days and you could take a set down and put another one up, all within the same orbit of that program, because you know you could take it down overnight and put the next one. So that, but if you were in a live mode, then you'd need a very big studio to put. If it was a comprehensive production involving lots of different venues, you know, I mean it's all fairy tale, we know that. But if you had lots of sets to go into the studio, then this was your place to do it. You couldn't do it in one. We did, and again, here we go. The old folk will remember Huey Green's Double Your Money and Michael Miles' Take Your Pick, and LE shows, which would just require. I mean, Huey Green did a lot of stuff here, but you basically just had the one set, so it didn't matter. But no, I think probably Studio 5 took away some of the stuff that you do in 1 and 2. But then, you know, sometimes it didn't. They were all running. It was, without a doubt, a fun-filled factory. That's the way I describe it. I often remember the times when there was a production in A and B, as opposed to 1. And the other thing about Studio 5 is it's the control gallery, which is the hub, as everybody knows, of television production. It's where the director sits and directs the whole show, and the sound and lighting and cameras sort of orientate themselves. That would have been much, much more technically advanced than Studios 1 and 2, because it was built that much later. So yes, I think it was a wise decision. Maybe the board of directors on rediffusion would have differing views on it, I don't know. But as far as I was concerned, as one of the lads on the floor, no, I think it was a very, very good decision. And maybe there was a bit of show-off about it, because I know they had executives from other television companies, including American or European Union companies, coming in and having a look at it. Yeah, it was very much show-off time. I mean, you know, as I've seen it now, it's magnificent. You know, it's almost as sort of like the Wembley Arena when that's empty, when it's got a massive ice rink in it, or it's got a baseball thing or whatever. But no, I think it was well worth its weight in gold for her. And if we may advance to modern times, look at the X Factor. Now, I've been in it when the X Factor set's been in it. You couldn't put that set in any other studio, not any I've seen. You might squeeze it into one of them at Elstree. But I think Studio 5 was very, very necessary. If you look at the old Wembley with Studios 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., etc., I think you could have got that facility in most places. What you couldn't get is this studio, which is truly magnificent. I mean, it really is. Well, the opening of this studio was very interesting in that I seem to think there was a difference of opinion about how best to show it off as a very large studio. Because, you know, let's be very honest, if you're sitting at home as a viewer, you're not going to be horribly aware of how big the studio is. Your main concern is how good the program is, and then therefore what you need to have a studio like to do the program you were doing. So I think a lot of the AR management were very keen again to show off and say, look, this is the biggest studio in Europe. Now, how do we prove that to you? Well, there was one thought that you shoved a massive big drama in it, one called An Arabian Night, which was full of Moroccan bazaars and things, you know, and offices, and we won't go into An Arabian Night because it's around somewhere. Or the other alternative, which was, I think, a lot of production people working on Studio 5 said, look, if you want to show how big the studio is, why don't you spend all your money, not on building it, you've built it, but the budget for the opening night, if you put Frank Sinatra in one of the corners on the ground and put a camera in at the top in the opposite corner and get him to sing a couple of his songs, and you have this very, very, I'm being technical, and I'm sure most people understand what I'm talking about, you have this very long shot with this pinpoint in the distance, that's Frank Sinatra, and over 2 or 3 minutes you zoom very slowly into him just to show you how big the studio was and where he is. And if you want to do it in reverse, come out again, then that's entirely up to you. But that way you'll know how big it is, because you won't if you're just using it for lots and lots of sets. As you know, history will tell you an Arabian Night prevailed. They didn't do that. I mean, A, I don't think they could afford Frank Sinatra, and B, it was a crazy idea anyway. But you'll get the point about how you can prove how big the studio is. I was the senior cameraman on an Arabian Night. We had 7 or 8 cameras on it. It was directed by a lovely man called Mark Lawton from the very posh control gallery, which was the first time that was ever used, obviously. I don't know how it fared ratings-wise, and it's too long ago to remember any of the criticisms of it, but no, it was a very big, successful show by any terms. And I think the next day they whipped it all out, put something else in, and Studio 5 was born. There was a man called Dan Farson who was nothing to do with LE, Light Entertainment. He was a features presenter, a highly political features presenter. But his dad, his father, left him a pub in the East End of London. And this pub used to have Cockney entertainers in it every night, all singing, all dancing, all going on. And one of the Light Entertainment officials or executives, I think, got invited down to Dan's pub and loved it and thought, gosh, this would make a very, very good entertainment series. We'll build a set that looks like a pub. We'll get a Cockney presenter, and they did, a guy called Ray Martin. Anybody over 70, and there aren't many of us left to remember all these names, nobody else will. And then they brought in singers, Kathy Kirby, all sorts of people, you know, who were relevant on the day, and did it as a sort of Cockney show pub. And it was so very popular, very successful, very enjoyable show to do. But no, Stars and Garters was very popular. Loads of big light entertainment shows done from Wembley. I mean, it was a prince in its own right, prince of studios. ATV had its stuff at Elstree. But no, I think Wembley, to me, based on my life, was highly successful. It really was. And then when I went to Thames, I never got in the studio because by then I was exclusively outside broadcasting, which is kind of just as exciting, if not more, than studio shows. Well, Stars and Garters was extremely popular for Associated Rediffusion. But then, so were a lot of its other shows. Don't forget Ready, Steady, Go. I mean, I'm sitting here and I can't remember them all, and I know heads of light entertainment for AR, who would be slightly older than me, if that's possible, would be shaking their heads and going, oh my God, he's missed that, and missed the other. But if we're talking studios, then, you know, this was the place to be, without any doubt. I mean, I directed the World Cup at Wembley. That was another story, in 1966. That was the one that we won. So really, my association with studios was going out. My affinity with them, my love for them wasn't, but, you know, certainly as a cameraman, and I think life, and I'm sure any cameraman listening, particularly one over there, you know, would be aware. I'm not suggesting for one mad moment that being a cameraman is not a serious job. It was, but directing became much more head-touching. You know, you did your job as a cameraman and you did it very well, and you're a very important part of the cog. But it's still massive fun, 5 or 6 guys on a crew, and Wembley, now I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, Wembley opened its own, well, I am, Wembley opened its own little bar. This studio, of which I'm now sitting, had its own proper staff bar, not an artist bar. Artists were allowed, but basically it was a staff bar. So at the end of a show, you know, all the camera guys would get together and go and have a half a pint of flowers, keg bitter, and talk about what we'd just done and what we were about to do. To me, as a director, it then became slightly more serious. Didn't stop me going for a half a pint of kegs bitter, but on the other hand, you know, it was. But no, my days here, the early days, were great fun. They really, really were. a thing which will be echoed by so many of my colleagues. They really were. Well, while I was here, certainly in my time, I do remember lots and lots and lots of big stars. Bing Crosby, Shirley Bassey, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, all, if you think about the era of Wembley from its on-air time of 55 to its off-air time of 68, you know, you named them, they were here really during that period. And it was the period, lots and lots of big pop stars. I know they're big-ish today, but I'm of the opinion that that was the period where a lot of the big-time people would be around and would definitely come and do programming here, without any doubt. When Rediffusion lost its franchise, which was a terrible shock to everybody, it was the weirdest thing, because the split between ABC and Rediffusion, because, you know, you are aware that Thames was an amalgamation of ABC Television and Rediffusion Television, and they had to band together to make one company, i.e. Thames, which was predominantly managed by ABC. Howard Thomas was the managing director of ABC. He became managing director of Thames. Brian Tesler was controller of programs for ABC. He became controller of programs for Thames. But departmentally, it got split up. The drama department at ABC remained pretty much intact under Lloyd Shirley, and he took all his drama directors to Thames to become head of drama. Light Entertainment was Philip Jones, head of Light Entertainment. He took all the ABC LE directors with him to Thames. Outside Broadcasting, under a lovely guy called Graham Turner, came over as a complete department. Now, I was one of Graham's producers. Jeremy Isaacs, very famous name in television, was head of features for Rediffusion. He took his entire department over to Thames. So it wasn't a sort of massive amalgamation. It was done departmentally. To the weird thing where I remember on Friday leaving my office at Rediffusion in Kingsway, and I came back in the same office, same secretary, same PA, same boss, same corridor, same front door. The only thing that had changed was the letterhead. It didn't say Rediffusion anymore, it said Thames. So that changeover was very strange. But it succeeded. Thames, again, just going apart from Rediffusion for a moment, Thames was a highly successful company who produced some brilliant programs, won a massive amount of awards, was given its own television Oscar, not a program, but the company was given one by the American Television Society, or whatever they call themselves over there. I remember getting involved in that. But the changeover was easy, but emotionally a bit severe, you know. But it did work. Yeah, of course, to sum it up in 2 words, if I'm allowed to say one of them, bloody marvellous. Elaborating, full of total nostalgia for it, and this, from me and all the colleagues I've ever worked with here, I know I share their views and they've got mine. It was a joy to work here, and we had a load of fun. And what's more, we were being paid for it.